Hi guys, it's Steph from IDRIVEACLASSIC. Now if you haven't watched it already, I've already done one video on the festival of the Unexceptional, and in my last video I covered off the concourse cars, and in today's video I'm looking round all the spectator cars in the car park. So let's go and have a look at some really cool cars. I am honestly overwhelmed with the selection of cars here today, and for those of you who haven't seen one of these before, this is a Lancia 2500 with a top speed of 120 miles an hour and a 2.5 litre engine. And this is my favourite car that's here, this gorgeous and amazing green Rover SD1, which was designed to replace the P6 and the Triumph 2000. And then this is pretty rare too, this is a Cordia, and there's only two left on the road, with this turbo showing as the only turbo in the UK. Now, they were made between 1982 and 1990, but I've never seen one. Have you? If you've got one, leave me a comment in the section below because I'd like to hear about them. Now, this is an escort. Everybody remembers escorts, everybody loves them, but again, it's one of those cars that you used to see all the time but now you don't see at all. Again, like this Saab, I mean, these are cars that I remember being quite prevalent on the roads and just aren't about at all. Now, this is a little bit special because we've not got just one Nissan Bluebird, we've got two Nissan Bluebirds. And if you want to know how they drive, I actually did a video a few weeks ago on an amazing Nissan Bluebird. So if you scroll back through my videos, you can watch that because it's well worth a watch. Now, here's a car that when I was at school, everybody seemed to have one as their first cars. It's a Peugeot, it's bog standard, it's your 206, it's the Super Mini, ticks all the boxes of the first car, but again, not really spotted unless you're around in France. Your MGs, you see these all the time. And then we're going to scroll over to this Renault 5. Now again, another Super Mini, once so popular, it was the best-selling car in France between 1972 and 1986. And they sold over 5 million of these little bad boys. So I thought we'd catch up with the owner, Sean Henry, and find out a little bit more about this car and why he bought it, and just about the Renault 5 in general, because I quite liked them back in the day and I still quite like them now actually.
Hello, I'm Sean Henry. I've owned this car. It's a Renault Super 5 from 1985. Originally it's a GTL spec, but most of it is now GTX spec because I wanted to make it exactly my car, but only using Renault 5 components. I've had this car for 6 years. It was my dream as an 11-year-old to have a Renault 5 Mark 1. I got this Mark 2 as my 16th birthday present to restore, and we put it back on the road 6 years ago, and I've been enjoying it ever since. It's had quite a few bits and bobs changed around, as I say. I've actually tried to sell this car 1 or 2 times because as a typical classic car owner, you do get to the point of sometimes I hate this thing, and then you have a little break and then you just love it again. That's just typical ownership, and that's exactly what me and this car are like. When I get in this car and drive it, I'm in my element. 80s music, go down road, put my foot down, watch the rev count like I fitted to this car, fly around. It's the most adrenaline making moment of my life.
If you're a big fan of the YouTuber Hubnut, or you may know him as Ian Seabrook, you'll know exactly what this car is. This is an invacar. Now, invacars were banned in 2003, but apparently there are 15 that escaped the crusher, and yeah, they're being driven around. I mean, look at this thing, it's absolutely awesome. Now, if you haven't seen one before, they were introduced for people that were disabled, and it was a way for them to get around. And there were around 18,000 built between 1972 and 1977, and yeah, as you can see, it's a one-person vehicle, relatively slow, and yeah, the scheme was ended in 1977 because of safety issues. I mean, yeah, there's not much crash protection and it does look a little bit scary to drive, but I mean, look, it's a really great way for probably many people that had no other way round to get around. I mean, personally, it's a shame that there are not more cars like this nowadays that maybe people could be using. So I thought I'd catch up with the owner and ask him a little bit about this amazing invacar.
I've come here from Milton Keynes. I'm driving an AC Model 70, which is more commonly known as an invacar, even though that technically is a catch-all term that used to apply to all invalid carriages over the years. I ended up with this car just purely because I heard about it completely by random chance. And I found, just from an engineering perspective, even before I knew the social history behind it, that it was just a fascinating little vehicle with much more sophisticated design than the very antiquated looking body belies. And the more I read about it, the more fascinated I got. And I was lucky enough to find a very rough example at one point that, while mechanically sound, was missing most of its bodywork, having done several years' work as a tug on a caravan park. And then luckily I came across this relatively complete body after it had been used to restore another invacar, an actual invacar, not AC, to working order, and transplanted my running gear into it, and the end result was a, well, I'll say mostly working car that I'm slowly just trying to piece back to, I wouldn't say as new state, but a respectable state. I think that would be my target.
If you've never seen one of these, then I'm not really surprised, because they're not a massively iconic and well-known Vauxhall. It's the Vauxhall VX4 90, and it does, well, in today's climate and the price of petrol, a shocking 17 miles to the gallon. And bear in mind, that's kind of the best that you're going to get out of it. You can get it over 100 miles an hour, however, so I think that's pretty good. And it's got pretty good acceleration as well, because you can get from 0 to 60 in around 11 seconds, which would be ideal for me on the commute. Now, the reason you may not have seen one of these before is there were only ever 900 produced. Now, when I read an article written by Motorsport in 1962 about these amazing little cars, they did say that it retailed at just under £10,000, and that although it was fast and it had everything going for it, they weren't entirely keen about it. But in today's climate, I absolutely love it. I have a small confession to tell you. I am definitely not going to be able to get all the way around this car park because there are so many cars here. So hopefully I'll be able to give you a little bit of a tour of some of the cars that are here and some of my favourites, because there's some cars here where there's maybe only one or two left on the road, or things that I've never seen before. And honestly, it is so overwhelming. I can't believe how many cars are here. Realistically, I think the organisers could make this a 2-day event, because truly it's just one of the most exceptional things I've ever been to. Ironic considering the name of the festival. And to be fair, usually you get a few rogues slip in, and this modern Mercedes is pretty much one of the only ones I've seen. It's been quite well organised. Now, this for me was one of the most unusual things on the field. It's a Ford Country Squire. Now, if you've never seen one before, it's probably because it's American. It reminds me of that film, I think it's called Uncle Buck. And one of the interesting things about this car is that it just falls under that station wagon bracket, and they're sometimes known as woodies, which is a bit ironic really, because the wood in the 50s was actual wood, but then it became kind of like that fake wood like you see on some of the late Rover dashes after the early 50s. But my god, some of the detail on this car is absolutely immense. And so for the first 2 generations it was based upon the Ford Custom Deluxe and the Ford Crestline, and then as they moved it through, they kind of just started to make a few changes. But as you can see, it is a hefty vehicle, absolutely enormous. I mean, they got discontinued in 1992 because they introduced the Ford Crown Victoria. And as we look around this car, I hope I give you some appreciation for how absolutely enormous this is. I mean, hats off to the owner, because I certainly wouldn't want to try and park it in this country. Because for those of you tuning in from abroad, our parking spaces are based on the size of a Ford Anglia, which is miles smaller than this thing. I mean, look at these seats. They're absolutely incredible. We certainly didn't see things like this coming out of Britain. This is truly exceptional. One of the great things about this show is how many Rovers are here, because things like this Rover 213 you used to see everywhere, garden centres, Asda, and I bet you can't remember the last time you saw one. A bit like this Rover really, and which I'm going to catch up with the owner in just a second to tell us a little bit about this car. But again, it's this sad reality that Rovers are, I mean, in my childhood especially, Rovers seem to be everywhere. And that's one of the great things about this show, is it does, I think they've brought all the right people to the show. It's all the cars that you used to see that you don't see anymore. And I'm going to show you one of my favourite cars. So flip round to this amazing Rover Metro, because it wouldn't be an iDrive Classic video if I couldn't somehow shoehorn a Rover Metro into the video. Now, this is what I learnt to drive in. I learnt to drive in Rover Metros, and I absolutely loved them. And I remember you used to be able to pick them up out of the paper for 200-300 quid, and that's one of the reasons that they don't exist anymore, because you'd go to a garage, they'd say, guess what, you've blown the head gasket on your K series and it's going to cost several £100s to repair, and people would just go and get another one out of the paper. And it's a shame really, because these are all amazing cars and they deserve to live on.
Hi, my name's Graham. This is my Rover 216 Tomcat. I've had it since last October. Slowly restoring it. It's going in for a respray in a couple of minutes this winter time. It was really a Rover demonstrator car when it was new, so it's quite rare and quite unusual. I've had a slow, ongoing love of Rovers for many years. It took me a long time to find a 216 Coupe.
I could not believe when I spotted this Princess 2, and if you've not seen one before, then again I'm not surprised. It's a British Leyland classic. It is the Austin Princess, but in this country it was just badged as Princess. It was only when they were sold abroad that it was sold as the Austin Princess. Now, one of the things I love about this car is the fact that it's so rare, and yet the owner is just not taking it seriously whatsoever, and they seem to be having the most fun with this car. I mean, look at it, from the beaded seats through to all the accessories on the roof. I just love it. I think it's possibly one of the best cars in the car park today, and it looks like it's used as well, which is really refreshing. So this looks to be the same year as Jill, because it's on an X-Reg, so it'll be 1981. Can you believe you could get something this cool in 1981 that looked, well, quite frankly, one of the most 70s cars I've ever seen. Now, it was succeeded by the Austin Ambassador, and again, if you've not seen one of those, I'm really not surprised, because it's another British Leyland car which has just totally disappeared from the roads. And it's that same old problem that, you know, you could pick up cars so cheaply that it just wasn't cost effective to fix. This is probably pretty sad to admit, but one of my favourite things was watching all the cars drive away, because you got to hear so many different engines, you've got so many different cars, and it's exciting really, because it's kind of like taking a step back in time to, you know, the roads of yesteryear. I mean, look at all these cars, they're brilliant. Unfortunately, because the wind noise is just so horrendous, because it's been so windy today, you can't hear the engines as well as I would like. But I had to show you some of these cars driving away, because, well, I just think it's been brilliant, and this has honestly been one of my best events this year. I just couldn't fault it whatsoever. It's just been, well, fantastic. I'm just going to skip past this BMW to show you this amazing Fiat 127. Now, I love little Fiats because I'm a bit of a mini car sort of person. It's really my sort of thing. I love small cars, and this Fiat 127 really didn't disappoint, from the colour to everything about it, to the design, to the styling. And for those of you who don't know too much about the Fiat 127, it was produced between 1971 and 1983, and it was produced as a replacement for the 850, and then it was replaced itself by the Fiat Uno. I absolutely love showing you some of these cars, and this one's no exception. And if you don't recognise that badge, it's a Datsun, or some people would know it a Nissan, and this is a Nissan Cherry. Now, if you're watching abroad, you might recognise this as the Nissan Pulsar. So basically, the name Cherry worked really well in Europe, so they carried on with it. Just one of those confusing things that they do when they import cars. And you could have got some different engine choices on this one: a 1 litre, a 1.2, or a 1.4. And yeah, they were quite popular. They sold all the way through to 1982. Now, we've got a few other different things here. Things like this Volvo 340, which is very reminiscent of childhood. You see this sort of thing all the time. There's a few things like MGs as well. Now, I wanted to show you my friend Jude's Kia Pride. Now, I really like the fact that this is Jude's first car, technically. He's still learning to drive, and he's chosen a Kia Pride. Now, I've asked him to come on camera, actually, to talk a little bit about this, because I've known Jude for quite a while. He's been very passionate about older cars, and one of the most refreshing things is that Jude is only 17. So it's quite exciting, really, because you always worry a little bit that the future of cars is going to just, you know, these cars are just going to get forgotten. forgotten, so I wanted to make sure I featured Jude today because I really love the fact that he, at such a young age, has taken on a car that quite a lot of people are saying, what? A Kia Pride? Because they weren't exactly massively popular back in the day, and there certainly aren't many left now.
So I've always liked quirky Korean cars and different kind of cars. I started off liking more kind of Eastern European cars like Yugos, Ladas, Protons. They Malaysian, they're still quirky. And then it's kind of progressed. And there was a local Kia Pride identical to the one I'm in, and it was just the same. And I always saw it around, but eventually it disappeared, and you never kind of saw any other Kia Prides. And then I saw this one. I left a note on the windscreen asking if the owner would ever consider selling it. And a few days later, I got a call back from the owner, a 97-year-old man, who said he'd keep my note for when he does give up driving. Then fast forward about 5 months, he gave me a call and he said that he's lost confidence in driving and that he wants the car sold. He loves the car, but he just couldn't drive anymore. And a few days later, I was down to his house and I bought it. And it's been a great car. I've only had it a week, but I'm loving driving it and learning in it, and I don't plan to sell it, and I really just want to keep it forever at the moment. And of course it's Mazda based, so you don't have to worry about reliability. Japanese, it's a right laugh, because back in the day they used to call them bouncy castles because the suspension was so like bouncy. When you go around corners or over bumps, it's like you're kind of on a trampoline. But it's all the kind of character of driving such a car. But I'm yet to come across another in the few weeks I've had it, and I haven't seen any others in quite a long time, because this is actually one of 26 left of the early Mark 1 Kia Pride, as in roadworthy examples, and there are only about another 70 or 80 later ones, so they really are a rare sight now. But because they were budget cars when new and they were never really appreciated, many people just scrapped them for little things or when they needed welding, and they've never really been kept or appreciated. So it's really nice just to kind of save an underdog as such.
There are so many iconic little cars here, and this is one of my favourite. It's the Fiat Panda. Now, I always wanted a Fiat Panda, but it's just never worked out for me, and I think now that I'm so into the British car scene, it won't be something that I end up getting. Now, the Fiat Panda was made between 1980 and 2003, and these are the proper Fiat Pandas, not those bloated things that you see nowadays, but they've remade them. And can you believe this came all the way from the Netherlands? And then another iconic European car, the Citroen 2CV, and predictably it has a hub nut sticker in the back window. And if you want to know what a 2CV can achieve, it's worth going to have a look at hub nut on YouTube, actually, because he's just taken one all the way to Croatia, quite successfully actually, and some of the videos are very entertaining, and it's a real testament to cars like this, that for all the people that say that they can't do it, they actually can. And look how stunning this is. I mean, how could you say no to that beautiful two-tone paintwork? Now, another thing that I really love are things like this, your commercial vehicles, because quite often they're the first things that get scrapped because they get used and abused. And I'm just going to do a little pano around the car park there so you can see some of the amazing vehicles. I mean, look how many cars are here. I'm so overwhelmed. I didn't expect this many at all. Now, as I briefly alluded to, I absolutely love the fact there are commercial vehicles here, things that people have used every single day and really hammered as well for work. So some of these vehicles have done insane mileage, and yet look how nice they all look. They're all really tidy. I mean, you know, it'd be resto jobs, but I wanted to show you some of these as well, because I think we always tend to see your classic cars at car shows and we forget that commercial vehicles were just as important. So I mean, you always see things like Morris Minor vans, and occasionally see a Marina van, and you'll have seen a Marina van which won the concourse actually in my first video. But it's nice to see things like this British gas van being used and being loved and being enjoyed. And then one of my favourite things in this car park, I spotted this incredible Land Rover, which was coach built to be used by the fire service. So as you can see, it was built so that they could get all their ancillaries in and that it would fit everything in. I mean, it's pretty standard anyway, but I mean, as you can see, the sides have been removed, and you've got those reinforced bars in there, but it's really clever. I mean, as you can see, just a little bit of info there just about the company that built it. And I love seeing stuff like this because it's that everyday heritage that people have forgotten, but people have invested such time and money to not only build these vehicles and enjoy them and bring them back from the dead, but also bring them to shows as well. So it's nice to see stuff like this here as well, and it's definitely been appreciated by me, and I'm sure you do too. With so many incredible cars here, it's been an absolute struggle to pick which cars to show you, which cars to tell you a little bit more about. So hopefully I've done this to show some justice, because it's been so difficult, because honestly, every car deserves to be featured. They're all amazing. Every car here that I've seen has been so interesting, but I also wanted to chat to some owners too. So I grabbed my friend Sam, who I've never met until today, but we've chatted online because I wanted to learn a little bit more about his Vauxhall Astra, which sadly I forgot to film. Sorry.
Hello, my name's Sam, and I own a 1994 Vauxhall Astra Merit. I only bought it about just over a month ago. I bought it from the second owner. Pardon me. He'd owned it since 1997. Before he had it. It was a Motability car. He bought it in 1997 with 10,000 miles on the clock, and now it's only on 34,000 miles. He barely used it. He told me he used to use it only to take his wife shopping and visit family in Falkirk, so it's barely been used. He preferred to walk. So yeah, drove it yesterday, drove it down to Festival of the Unexceptional, 340 miles from Edinburgh, and it never missed a beat. It never went wrong. But yeah, so wouldn't be my first choice of classic car, but yeah, the old guy gave up driving and I couldn't bear to see it like scrapped or unloved or ragged about, so yeah, hopefully it'll be around for many years to come.
With so many cars here today, it's been such a struggle to work out what to show you, and even though I split the video 2 ways and I've tried to cram in as many cars as possible, I just hope that I've been able to do this show some justice. And as I say goodbye to you guys, I thought I'd show you some of the cars in the lineup, and if you were considering this show and you didn't make it this year, I would definitely say add it into your calendar for next year, because I've seen so many cars here today that I've never seen before or I've only seen online. The concourse was fantastic, as you would have seen in the first video, and honestly I went home from the show and I couldn't stop smiling. It was just incredible, and all the cars that were here were just beautiful as well, even cars that were well loved and used on a regular basis. Every single car that was here was, in my opinion, truly exceptional, which, given the name of the festival of the Unexceptional, was slightly ironic. However, I hope you've enjoyed seeing all these cars today and getting a good sense of what this show is about, because I didn't really understand until I came, and I almost feel like I totally undervalued how amazing it was going to be. So for just over £5 you could come next year. It's held in Buckinghamshire. Loads of people have already asked me this question, which is in England. It was fairly easy for us to get to, and I'd thoroughly recommend it. Now until next time, take care and drive safely.